Since Tim's death, Amy had changed. Not in the way people usually do, not just tears and quiet stares, but in how her whole presence seemed dimmer. At Heartland, she went through the motions, feeding the horses, checking the fences, smiling at Lindy when it counted. But anyone who truly knew Amy knew that the weight she carried had become too much, and no one knew that better than Ty. Ty had been watching her closely, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in the way someone watches the person they love slowly break apart from the inside. He saw it in her silences, in the way her hand would linger a little longer on Spartan's neck after brushing him, like she was asking for strength, in the way she'd disappear into the fields, thinking no one noticed she was gone. They'd faced loss before. They'd faced fire, injury, court battles, and the kind of pain that leaves lasting marks. But this time, it was different. Tim's death had taken something from Amy that Ty wasn't sure he could give back. Still, he had to try. It was late one night, just a few days ago, when Amy finally let it out. They were sitting outside the cabin, the stars above them, the air cold but still. Amy had been quiet for most of the evening until she finally said, "I'm tired of pretending I'm okay." That was all. Just that one sentence. But it hit Ty like a punch to the chest. He promised her then, in a low, steady voice, that she wouldn't have to carry it alone anymore. But a promise isn't always enough. That's when the idea came to him. He remembered something, a night from years ago. A simple dinner in town, nothing fancy, just the two of them talking about their dreams, their horses, their future. She'd laughed that night, really laughed, the kind that made her eyes light up and her shoulders drop. Ty wanted that again, just a flicker of that Amy, the one who believed in healing, who had hope. He started searching, quietly, carefully. No one could know yet. This had to be just for her. After a few hours online, Ty stumbled across something promising, a restaurant called the Sterling Estate. It was supposedly just outside of Calgary. The pictures were stunning. Chandeliers, fireplaces, glowing lights that looked like something out of a movie. Couples holding hands across white linen tables, the whole place bathed in golden warmth. Romantic. Peaceful. Everything Amy hadn't had in months. Everything she needed. He clicked book now without a second thought. The next day, Ty began quietly arranging everything. He asked Georgie to watch Lindy for the night. He spoke to Lisa, making sure Jessica wouldn't be left alone. Lou had someone nearby in case she needed help with anything. He thought of every detail, every single one. Amy wouldn't have to lift a finger. Finally, when the night came, he approached her in the cabin, heart racing. She looked up from the couch, tea cooling in her hands. He smiled gently, like he used to. "Amy," he said, "I need you to trust me tonight." No questions. She blinked at him, tired, curious, a little wary. "This better not be a surprise party." He shook his head, grinning. "No party. Just us." What Ty didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that this night wouldn't go the way he planned. Not even close. As Amy changed into the navy blue dress she hadn't worn since before the fire, Ty felt that familiar ache in his chest. She looked beautiful, strong, even in her exhaustion. And as she stepped into the truck and he handed her a soft bandana for a blindfold, she gave him a small smile. A real one. That was enough for him. With her eyes covered and her hand in his, they drove off into the dark Alberta evening. The stars blinked overhead. The world was quiet. The road stretched ahead like a promise waiting to be kept. Ty had no idea he was driving them straight into a disaster. The truck hummed quietly as it rolled along the back roads of Alberta. Amy leaned into the seat, blindfold still tied gently across her eyes. Her fingers were laced with ties on the console, her smile small but real. It was the first time in weeks she wasn't thinking about the ranch, the paperwork, the grief. For a while, she just breathed. Ty glanced at her from time to time, catching that little curve of her lips, the way she seemed lighter, freer than she had in a long time. That alone made all the planning worth it. He kept telling himself that everything was on track, that the GPS was leading them to the glowing lights and soft music promised in the photos. For the first 30 minutes, it all felt perfect. They talked the way they used to, about nothing, everything. Amy teased him about how nervous he'd been the first time they went on a date. Ty reminded her of the time she got them lost on the trail and refused to admit it. They laughed, really laughed. But as the truck continued to roll through the dark, empty countryside, something began to shift. Ty frowned slightly. The lights of Calgary should have been coming into view, or at least some signs of life. But the highway had narrowed into a lonely two-lane road with no visible turnoffs. Fields stretched out on both sides, endless and dark, broken only by the occasional flicker of fence posts under the headlights. Amy, sharp as ever, even with the blindfold on, noticed the change in his energy immediately. "How far is this place again?" she asked, half playful, half curious. "Not far," Ty said. Too quickly. Amy chuckled. "That's what you said 15 minutes ago." Is this one of those romantic mystery dinners in the middle of nowhere kind of nights? Ty forced a laugh. Exactly. Total surprise. But inside, his confidence was unraveling. Something felt off. The route didn't match what he remembered from the listing. The turn that should have taken them toward a cityscape had led them deeper into the rural dark. And yet, the GPS still insisted they were only 10 minutes away. Ty's grip on the wheel tightened. Another 5 minutes passed. Still no lights, still no buildings, just gravel shoulders and an eerie, creeping quiet. Amy shifted in her seat. "Ty, where are we?" He hesitated. "Almost there. Just a little more. Adventure, kidnapping," she teased, but her tone had shifted. She was still joking, but underneath the smile was a growing concern. Then finally, the robotic voice of the GPS broke the silence. "You have arrived at your destination." Ty slowed the truck, headlights sweeping across what looked like nothing. Well, not nothing. There was a building, but not the grand, golden-lit restaurant he'd imagined. Not the elegant Sterling estate from the website. Number. This was something else entirely. A lopsided structure stood ahead of them, paint peeling, windows dark and flickering. A crooked sign barely clung to its frame above the front door, swinging slightly in the wind. A handful of rusted trucks were scattered across a wide gravel lot, looking more abandoned than parked. The whole place looked like the backdrop of a low-budget horror film, not a fine dining destination. Ty's stomach dropped. He blinked. Looked again. This couldn't be it. He checked the address on his phone. It matched. Amy slowly reached up and untied the blindfold. As her eyes adjusted to the headlights, her face registered the scene in front of her. Silence stretched between them. "Oh no," she said softly. Ty scrambled. "Okay, I know what this looks like." Amy turned to him, her face unreadable. "Ty," she began slowly, is this the Sterling estate?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. It was supposed to be. The website, the photos, it looked incredible. She blinked. This looks like a haunted diner that hasn't served food since the 80s. "I got scammed," he muttered, his voice tight with disbelief. For a beat, neither of them said anything. Then, unexpectedly, Amy laughed. Not a soft, polite chuckle. A real belly-shaking, tear-forming laugh that took Ty completely by surprise. She leaned back against the seat, covering her mouth as giggles spilled out of her. "I can't believe this," she gasped. "You tried to take me to a romantic mystery dinner and instead brought me to a crime scene." Ty groaned, sinking into the steering wheel. "It was supposed to be perfect." Amy reached out and squeezed his arm, still laughing. "Oh, it is. Just not in the way you planned." Somehow that laugh, that wild, unexpected reaction, made the entire disaster feel like a strange kind of success. But the night wasn't over. As they sat there, the headlights casting long shadows across the lot, the wind picked up, whistling through the cracks in the building's siding. A single light above the door flickered on, dim and buzzing. Amy's laughter faded slightly as she stared at the building. "You don't seriously want to go in, do you?" Ty looked at her, looked at the building, then back at her. "We have a reservation," he said, shrugging helplessly. She narrowed her eyes. "If we get murdered, I'm haunting you." "That's fair," he said with a crooked smile. Together, they stepped out of the truck. The gravel crunched beneath their boots as they approached the building. The wind was colder now, sharper, and the building loomed larger with each step. Amy clutched his arm. Ty felt her lean into him. It wasn't fear. Not really. It was trust. Despite everything, she trusted him. He looked up at the flickering sign, then back at her. Ready? No, she said flatly. But let's do it anyway. Ty pushed open the door. The bell above it let out a sad, broken jingle. Inside, it smelled like old oil, dust, and something faintly floral, a scent that didn't belong but clung to the air stubbornly. The lights were dim. A few booths lined the walls. The floor creaked, and behind the counter stood a woman in a wrinkled shirt with a name tag that read Kathy. She looked up, more confused than surprised. Ty cleared his throat. Reservation for 2. Under Borden. Kathy raised an eyebrow and reached for a notebook that looked like it had survived the last 2 decades without ever being replaced. She flipped through it slowly. Reservation? She repeated. Amy bit her lip to stop another wave of laughter. Ty nodded. Sterling Estate Restaurant? I booked online. Kathy frowned. That site again? Someone's been putting fancy pictures online for years. We've been trying to get them taken down. Ty blinked. So, this isn't the Sterling Estate? She snorted. We used to be Sterling's Diner, back in the 90s. Signs half fallen off. Never fixed it. Amy couldn't hold it anymore. She doubled over, laughing again. And this time, Ty joined her. Because somehow, in the most ridiculous, backwards, totally unplanned way, the night had become exactly what Amy needed. But neither of them knew. The worst part of the night hadn't even started yet. The moment they stepped inside the diner, it was like walking into a forgotten photograph. The lighting was dim, not by design, but by age. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed above them, one flickering like it was deciding whether to live or die. A strange blend of old grease, mildew, and artificial rose scent lingered in the air. Nothing about this place matched the elegant Sterling Estate promise Ty had seen online. Amy looked around, still giggling under her breath, but now her laughter was giving way to curiosity and something else, unease. The woman behind the counter, Kathy, didn't seem surprised by their arrival, just faintly puzzled. She gestured toward a booth in the corner. You two can sit over there. Menus are laminated, so don't worry if they're sticky. Ty hesitated. Amy gave him a look, that playful but pointed, you got us into this look, and slid into the booth. The seat creaked loudly beneath her. Ty followed, still trying to process just how spectacularly this night had gone off the rails. This is officially the weirdest date we've ever had, Amy said, glancing at the dusty napkin holder and faded ketchup bottle. Ty rubbed the back of his neck. I was going for romantic. This is dystopian lunch hour. Amy chuckled again, but this time her laugh was shorter. She looked around. The place felt too quiet, like time had stalled. And then the lights flickered, all of them, once, twice, then steadied again. Amy's smile faltered. She leaned in slightly. Is that normal? Ty looked up. Old wiring, probably. Probably, Amy repeated, but her voice had lost its playful edge. A low clang echoed from the back of the diner. The kitchen. It wasn't the clatter of cooking. It was heavier, like something metal being dropped or dragged. Ty turned in his seat. The door to the kitchen sat slightly ajar, swinging gently. Maybe they're just cleaning, he said, though even to him it sounded weak. Amy tilted her head. You hear that, right? Another sound followed. Muffled voices. Not friendly chatter, not kitchen staff calling out orders, just voices. Low, urgent, impossible to make out. Kathy was gone. They hadn't seen her leave, but the counter was now empty. Amy glanced around. Okay, this is where it starts to feel like a bad idea. Ty looked down at the menu, pretending to read it, trying not to show the knot of tension forming in his chest. He couldn't let this night turn into a full-blown disaster, not after everything Amy had been through. He'd brought her here to give her relief, a break from the grief that had swallowed their lives. Now she was squinting toward the shadows, clutching her purse like a shield. Amy, he said softly, do you want to leave? She paused. Then she shook her head. No, we're here. Might as well see it through. Besides, we've survived worse, haven't we? Ty gave a small smile. Yeah, we have. Just then, the bell above the front door gave a sudden clang. Amy jumped. So did Ty. A man walked in. Tall, wiry, maybe in his 50s. His jeans were worn, boots dusty, and his jacket looked like it hadn't seen the inside of a washing machine in a decade. He paused when he saw them, then grinned. "Didn't expect to see customers tonight," he said, voice rough but calm. Ty nodded. "We were told this was the Sterling estate." The man let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, I get that a lot. Website's fake. Been trying to report it for months, but no one does anything. Probably some hacker bored out of his mind. People keep showing up thinking it's some 5-star place." Amy blinked. "Wait, so who are you?" The man stepped closer, pulling off his gloves. "I'm the owner now. Inherited the place from my uncle. He ran it for years, kept it old school, didn't believe in updating anything. After he passed, I tried to fix it up a bit, but, well, it's been slow." Ty eyed him cautiously. "We heard noises from the kitchen." The man raised an eyebrow. "Kitchen?" "Oh, that's just the back freezer. Door gets stuck. Probably what you heard." Amy looked uncertain. "And Kathy? She left," he said quickly. "I think. She disappears sometimes. Kinda just comes and goes." There was something about the way he said it. Too casual, too dismissive. Ty felt his instincts kick in. Something wasn't right. Amy seemed to feel it too. She straightened slightly in her seat. The man looked at them again. "You two still want to eat, or—" Ty opened his mouth to say no, to pull Amy up and get her out of there, but before he could speak, the lights flickered again, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, from the back, a sound. Not the clatter of a freezer door. Footsteps, slow, heavy, getting closer. Amy whispered, "Ty." He reached for her hand under the table, fingers tightening around hers. He turned on the flashlight on his phone and pointed it toward the kitchen. Something moved. A shadow. Amy stood. "We need to leave, now." They backed toward the front door, the phone light cutting through the dark and narrow beams. The man, the supposed owner, was no longer in sight. Then from behind the counter, a voice, low and unfamiliar, called out, "You shouldn't be here." Ty froze. Amy gripped his arm. "Go now." The front door refused to budge, locked. Ty rattled the handle. It was open 5 minutes ago. The footsteps from the kitchen were closer now, so close they could almost feel the floor vibrate beneath them. Amy's breath was shaky. What kind of restaurant is this? And suddenly the lights snapped back on. Everything was as it had been. The man stood behind the counter again, looking confused. "Hey, you okay?" Amy stared. "What just happened?" The man frowned. "What do you mean?" Ty looked around. No one else in sight. No sound from the kitchen. The place looked normal again, if you could call it that. He didn't answer. Amy looked at him. "Let's go." This time the door opened. Cool night air rushed in. Ty and Amy stepped outside, hearts pounding, neither speaking until they reached the truck. Ty started the engine. "We're done. This place. We're never coming back here." Amy stared at the diner as it shrank in the rearview mirror. "Did that actually happen?" she asked quietly. Ty didn't respond, because part of him didn't know the answer. And deep down, they both felt it. Whatever had happened inside that diner wasn't over. The road back to Heartland was quiet. Too quiet. Ty kept his eyes fixed on the highway, both hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. Amy sat beside him, silent, her arms crossed over her chest as the darkness outside pressed against the windows of the truck. Neither of them spoke for the first few miles. The weight of what had just happened at the diner clung to the air between them like fog. Amy finally broke the silence. "I'm not even sure what I saw in there." Ty glanced at her. "I don't know either. But that place, something was off." Amy nodded slowly. It wasn't just the power outage. It was like we were being watched. That voice, the door locking, none of it makes sense. Ty didn't respond. He was thinking about it too, about how the atmosphere inside that diner had shifted in a way he couldn't explain, like they had stepped into a different world, one that didn't follow the rules they were used to. But the strangest part, it didn't feel like it had ended. Back at Heartland, the ranch was still and dark, the sky above blanketed in stars. Ty parked the truck, and for a moment neither of them moved. Amy finally exhaled and reached for the door. As she stepped out, she paused. Wait, what's that smell? Ty followed her gaze. The scent hit him then. Faint but sharp, a metallic tang in the air, something that didn't belong at the ranch. It smelled like old copper, like rust, and something slightly burnt. They looked at each other. Amy walked around to the back of the truck, frowning. Something about the scent was familiar. She opened the tailgate slowly and froze. There, sitting at the edge of the bed, was a small, cracked picture frame. The photo inside was so old, it was almost black and white. A family stood in front of what looked like a younger version of the same diner. The sign above the door read Sterling's Diner, 1965. Amy stared. This wasn't here when we left. Ty shook his head. I didn't put it there. Did you pick it up at the diner? No, he said firmly. I didn't touch anything. Amy picked up the frame carefully. It was cold to the touch. Ice cold, like it had been sitting in a freezer. The glass was cracked in one corner.